Hello, welcome to MEMO Conversations. I'm your video host, Osman Butt. Today we are talking about we're recording this on the Monday. We're recording this on Tuesday, the 10th of October, 2023. And as we speak, Israel is bombing the Gaza Strip, which has been under the Israeli siege since 2007. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told Palestinians to leave Gaza and has ordered strikes. However, his government have also ordered that Gaza be totally sealed off, leaving the 2.1 million residents trapped. Electricity has been cut off, and a number of residential buildings, hospitals, houses, and schools have been destroyed. The death toll is high and climbing. There are also Israeli army and settler attacks on the West Bank on Palestinians in the West Bank. The immediate trigger for Israel's latest aggression was Hamas and other aligned groups' offensives on the 7th of October 2023 on Saturday, in which they briefly took control of Israeli military crossings into Gaza and a number of Israeli settlements, and taking a number of hostages. However, this is not the whole picture, and we are going to discuss this today. Joining me today to discuss this is Yara Eid. Yara Eid is a 23-year-old war journalist from Gaza who currently resides in London after growing up in the besieged Gaza Strip. Yara, welcome to MEMO Conversations.
Thank you.
So it's obviously, this is a very, it feels like every few years we go through the cycle of Gaza gets bombed again and again and again, and it doesn't seem to register to the rest of the world that people in Gaza have lived in complete, they live in poverty because, of course, of the blockade. There's repeated rounds of violence against Gaza, and it doesn't really feel like it penetrates outside. It penetrates people's imagination that things in Gaza are always very bad, and that Israel does these attacks quite frequently. Yet all of a sudden, because of what happened on the 7th of October, we're now suddenly talking about Gaza, but in a very different light. So perhaps we could sort of start there. Could you perhaps tell us, what has been happening?
Yeah. I think what's been happening, we can't talk about what's happening now in the last 4 days without considering the wider context and without considering what's been happening for the last 75 years. Israel has a military occupation not only on Gaza, but on the West Bank as well. Palestinians in Gaza are witnessing their fifth aggression, or what Western media likes to call fifth war. But this is not true. This is not two equal sides. This is an occupier and occupied. This is an oppressor and oppressed. What's happening is 2.1 million people are trapped in the Gaza Strip. They can't leave. They don't have access to clean water, electricity. It's literally considered as the biggest open air prison in the world. Poverty and unemployment rates are really high in Gaza. I grew up there, and I don't know one person who grew up in Gaza who hasn't lost a friend, a colleague, or a family member because of Israeli airstrikes. But what's happening now that's different is, for the first time in decades, Israel is witnessing and going through something similar to what Gazans have been through, something similar to what Palestinians have gone through. And the whole world is astonished because they gotten used to the killing of Palestinians in Gaza. It was so normalized that every few years Israel will start an offensive against Gaza, kill a couple of thousand Palestinians. In 2014, they killed more than 2,000 Palestinians, civilians. Most of them are children and women. And this is not the first time it happens. I was, when I first started reporting, I started actually because I was grieving. That's how I started my journalism career. And I was grieving the loss that every single Palestinian grieved. The loss of Shireen Abu Akleh, our world-renowned journalist who's been with us since the beginning of the occupation, who's been literally documenting the Palestinian struggle for a long, long time, and she was killed in cold blood. After that, I felt the responsibility to use my voice as someone who speaks English, as someone who lives in the West, to actually educate people around me and to talk to Western media, especially that is so biased, and especially that they're so dehumanizing of the situation in Gaza. They don't understand that in that besieged Strip, there's 2.1 million people. Most of them are civilians. 70% of them are refugees who actually got displaced because of Israeli colonial regime. So, you know, Gaza is not Hamas. This is what I've been in so many interviews with Western media since this attack started on Gaza, and everyone is talking about Hamas and blaming Hamas and whether Hamas is the core reason for what's happening. But what people need to understand, that this is not an unprovoked attack. This did not just happen all in a vacuum. This has been happening for years and years. People in Gaza have been killed for years. And, you know, the whole international community has been watching them. It's really important to realize how this time is also unique in some aspects, because Israel has literally wiped off complete neighborhoods. Not that it was the first time it's done it, but Gaza right now is not Gaza. You can't recognize Gaza. I'm seeing videos of streets that I used to grow up in, and I can't recognize the street. I'm seeing neighborhoods that my family used to live in, and I can't recognize the neighborhood anymore. Complete residential buildings have been, you know, completely demolished to the ground. More than 700 Palestinians have been killed, and a lot of them are civilians and children. Sorry, I don't know if I answered your question. I've been doing so many interviews that my brain is just yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a very good opening answer. It's I mean, it's as you say, you know, many people have been killed, and I want you to sort of paint a picture for us about life in Gaza right at this minute, because when we obviously watch the news, we see from the Israeli side, you see, for example, when a missile flies in, you see air raid sirens, you see people taking cover, going, you know, into bomb shelters, all these things. And, you know, it's a big place and big country for people to hide in. Paint for us a picture of what happens in Gaza when these strikes happen.
Yes, of course, but I feel like I need to say something before I answer this question, which is, you might have heard, most people who follow me on social media have seen that one of my bestest friends has been killed. He is my closest friend in Gaza, and he is a war journalist as well. And we started our journalism career together, where we reported in the 2022 aggression on Gaza. And I just think it's really important to explain how difficult it is for me to come on camera and to talk about what's happening when I've just lost a dear friend, a brother, and a colleague. And, you know, this is literally why I'm doing this, because I want to commemorate his life. I want to talk to the whole world about how an innocent journalist was killed doing his job. He was only 21 years old. You know, he was the kindest soul I've ever met. He was not part of Hamas. He was not part of any militant group. He was actually doing his job. He was just at the border, wearing the press vest, wearing the helmet, and was reporting. So I think this is the context that we should start with, because this is where I don't think I would be able to do all of this right now, unless I'm doing it, and it's because I want him to know that I'm not gonna forget, and I'm not gonna let, you know, Israeli government to get away with it, as they've been getting away with war crimes for the past decades. But we can talk a bit more about Ibrahim And I just want to take the time on this conversation to commemorate his life and talk about how an innocent life was, taken from us. But to answer your question, if journalists are being targeted, journalists who are protected under all international conventions, who are literally, the most vulnerable group because they're exposing themselves to danger while reporting what's happening because they want to expose to the world the horrific crimes that happen during aggressions and attacks. If journalists are not safe, no one is safe. No one is safe, Osman. Like, my family right now, if I've literally just been talking about this and I was saying how there's no safe place in Gaza. People have been messaging me and asking me, is your family safe? Are they in a place that's far away? Are they away from the bombs? Or is their neighborhood, like, can they hide somewhere? And it's like, well, first, my family cannot take care because what does that mean? What are they supposed to do when there's no shelters, there's no bunkers, there's no place that's safe to go to? Where are they supposed to go? And then at the same time, Palestinian civilians are being targeted, and the Israeli, as you mentioned, the Israeli Prime Minister has asked Gazans to leave, as if Gazans have the privilege and the luxury of just booking a flight and leaving. We don't have an airport in Gaza. We have the two borders, and the Ares one is obviously completely not working right now because it's bordering Israel. And then we have the Egypt border, and guess what, Osman? They've bombed it today 2 times. And Egyptian government has just declared that it's not running anymore, the border. And they've threatened if any medical aid or any kind of aid gets into Gaza, they're going to bomb the trucks or whatever vehicle they're transporting the aid through. So what I'm trying to say is there's no safe place for anyone in Gaza to go to. There's no place you can hide. My family, my whole neighborhood was being bombarded yesterday. And you know where my mom took shelter? Under our dining table. My cousin was under the sofa. This is their shelter. Even UNRWA schools that Israel claims that they're not going to bomb, like UNRWA schools, which is UN schools that should be protected and should be, the only place where displaced people go to and should be like safe space. They're bombing UNRWA schools. They've bombed it. And it's like, well, where are you asking people to evacuate? Where do people go? My whole family group chat is saying, well, they're threatening to, or the bombing is getting really near to us and they're threatening to bomb my neighbor's house. But where do I go? No one is safe in Gaza. It's 365 kilometers squared. Do you know how densely populated Gaza is? They completely wiped off a refugee camp, Jabalia refugee camp. Yesterday, they bombed the trans area, which is the market of the camp, where people go get their basic supplies, bread, water, and they've completely bombed it when there was many civilians, more than 50 got instantly killed. We still don't have enough data because we don't have the luxury of having, resources in the medical field. Hospitals, we don't have enough hospitals. They're bombing hospitals. They've just bombed the Uyun hospital, which is for, and they clearly are sending a message to the whole world. We do not care about the lives of Palestinians in Gaza. They are less than us. They don't deserve to live. And not only that they've been continuously attacking Gaza, but they've also imposed a siege as if it wasn't under siege. But no, this siege doesn't even allow necessary things like water. They've cut the complete water supply to Gazans. People are literally scared of being, like starving to death. Like, imagine if you're not going to die from an Israeli missile, you're going to die from starvation. What's happening is really horrific. It's the most horrific aggression that's been happening in the last decade or so, and it's what's making it so much worse is that there's a complete media blackout, Osman. There's a complete media blackout. I cannot talk to my journalist friends back home. You know how many outlets have been reaching out to me? We want to talk to journalists on the ground. But how are you going to talk to journalists on the ground when they don't have internet? When they bombed the communication company in Gaza, the telecommunication company, we don't have signal. We can't. It took me 17 hours to reach my mom yesterday when they were bombarding my house. I couldn't know if she was alive or not. I was just searching in the news. And guess what? Journalists on the ground there that are very reliable, that are literally risking their life and have the news, they can't share it with the rest of the world. They don't have internet. Like now, the news are coming every 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, complete families can be wiped off the civil registry. I've been just talking to my friends and they've been urging me as a journalist. They're like, Yara, my friend lives in the Burej camp, which is the camp I grew up in, where the rest of my family, extended family, are there right now. And he's telling me, the camp is heavily being bombed and there's no news about it. I haven't been able to report on this camp because I can't find resources that are saying what's happening. Journalists are being also targeted. 7 journalists have been killed in the last 4 days and 10 are injured, heavily injured as well. They've targeted press offices. They've targeted journalists' houses. They're literally sending a message to threaten all journalists in Gaza. If you do say the truth, we will kill you. Just like killed Shireen Abu Aql, just like we killed Yasser Murtaja, just like we killed Ibrahim Lafi, and the world is silent. The world is watching this genocide happening.
What do you believe then is Israel's ultimate intentions in Gaza right now? Because, of course, the narrative has been, this strike by Hamas happened on 7th and this is just retaliation. But looking at the sort of rhetoric of the Israeli government, as well as, the many years preceding what's happened to what's happening right now, this is obviously not just about a retaliation. This is something bigger, possibly. What do you think their intention is?
Yeah. This is the thing. What we're hearing is Israel did not start this. Israel is just retaliating. Israel is just self-defending itself. But this is really, really misleading because it ignores the structural violence that Israel has put every single Palestinian living inside Palestine under. It ignores the 75-year-old long occupation, military occupation, It ignores how, okay, let's assume that it is the Hamas fault and they started it. How can Israel justify what's happening in the West Bank? How can you justify the house demolitions, the killing of Palestinians every single day? Mainly children and teenagers. How can they justify the imprisonment? Did you know that 5,200 Palestinians are in Israeli prisons right now? 5,200. You know that 170 of them are children under the age of 18. This is illegal under any law, and some of them, 1,000, more than 1,000, are taken hostage in administrative detention without trial, without charge, and they're just being jailed for years and years. So how can you justify this? There's no Hamas in the West Bank. So ultimately, this narrative that it is attacking Gaza because they're just responding to Hamas is completely misleading and completely false because, can we look at the history? What happened in 2022? What happened in 2021? Did Hamas start the attacks? No, it didn't. If Hamas started the attacks or not, they were gonna bomb Gaza every few years. And we see a trend. If you're a political analyst and you read about politics, you know that Israel uses the bombing and the killing of civilians in Gaza as literally a tactic for their politics, for advancing their political messaging and advancing their elections. Every time there's Israeli elections, many Palestinians get killed in Gaza. Israel decides we're going to show them how we can control Gaza and we're in control, and they start running an offensive. So this is really not an unprovoked attack. My people have been living under brutal occupation, under an occupation that denies their mere existence. what is the fault of me? Like what is my crime? What have I done in life? You know, as Yara, who I grew up in the UK, you know, when after I grew up in Gaza, I moved to the UK. So I've been living here for 7 years. Did you know that I couldn't go home for 6 years? I couldn't be with my family for 6 years. I left initially, and it's important to talk about why I left Gaza in the first place. And you know, Osman, I left because I was so traumatized. I was so traumatized. I couldn't live in Gaza anymore. In the 2014 war, I literally saw people getting cut into pieces in front of my eyes. And that's what completely changed my life. You know, I was 14 years old and I saw people getting cut into pieces, children. And then Israel comes and claims that it's self-defending. What are you? How are you self-defending yourself if you're killing my journalist friend? How is that self-defense? How can you justify that? How can you justify the murder? You know, and they believe in collateral damage. So they really think that every life in Gaza, you know, it can go because collateral damage is fine. You know, we don't care about Palestinians.
Yes, that's it's because that's very young if you're saying, you know, 7 years. You're only 23 now, so you would have left very, very young. So this is very like I mean, it's similar to stories of other refugees effectively, you know, those leaving at 14, 15, you know, coming across. It's really not that much different in that sense. But you know, when the assault began on Saturday, there was a sort of there was a degree of euphoria among many Palestinians, and I feel like it can be summed up by the tweet, Gaza has just broken out of prison. And in obviously the Western media, this was portrayed as Palestinians are celebrating the kidnapping of Israeli women and their mutilation, which of course wasn't the reason why this sort of euphoria existed. So could you explain to us, you know, just when you saw those images of the border crossing being knocked down and that kind of thing, what did it actually mean to a lot of Palestinians?
I'm just gonna start by saying, you know, that most of the population in Gaza has never left Gaza. People who are my age, so my generation, anyone who was born in 2000, you know, has never seen one day of peace in Gaza or one day without a blockade. We've been under a blockade for 16 years. That's literally a whole lifetime. You know, that's my whole life. This is all I know. I've never seen the West Bank. I've never seen Jerusalem. I've never seen other parts of my country. I've never, my best friend is living in Jerusalem. I couldn't see her. You know, when I'm in Gaza, I can't see her, but I can travel to the UK and reunite with her then. Palestinians, for the first time, saw a hope for a freedom. They saw that if they knock down the wall that surrounds Gaza and they actually managed to get into Israeli settlements, actually, and a lot of Western media is saying, oh, Hamas fighters are invading Israel. But let's talk about what they're invading. Let's talk about this. They're going into Israeli settlements that are illegal under international law, settlements that are built on stolen Palestinian lands. Most of the population in Gaza, as I said, are refugees. Those same refugees, just like me, I'm not originally from Gaza. I'm actually from the north of Palestine, from a little village called Maghar. And that's where my grandparents were kicked out and displaced and lost some of their family members in, 1948. So many of those Gazans have never been able to get out of Gaza or leave. Ibrahim, my friend, he's never left Gaza. He's never even gone to Egypt, which is bordering. Do you know how difficult it is to live and not be able? People with cancer, let's assume that, we can live without having the luxury of just going for holidays and leaving because we want to see the world. Let's just talk about when you really need to leave, when you need to go because of medical reasons, or when you need to go because you're dying at the border, or when you need to go because you want to visit your family, like what I couldn't go home, Osman, for 6 years. It was this like most difficult 6 years of my life. I wasn't okay. I was suffering from trauma. I was suffering from everything, but also the separation of my family. And every few years, another attack on my family, and not knowing if they're gonna live or not. Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are so tired and exhausted of this vicious cycle of violence that has no end. You know, when I reached to Gaza after, and you know, I couldn't reach to Gaza just by going and having the luxury of just going for a month and then going back to continue my studies. I literally had to take a year out of university to be able to go to Gaza because I would be stuck. And I gave myself a year to be able to leave again, because you need to apply for a permit and they might reject it. They might not even let you in. You need to pay for a permit. It can cost up to $1,500 if you're lucky and have the money. Most people in Gaza are living under the poverty line. How are they going to afford to do that when they're literally traveling to get basic human right, the right for healthcare, the right for treatment, you know?
Yeah, I think it's also interesting to point out, because there is obviously to some extent a generational divide in Gaza, and the generational divide is people who remember life before the siege, so who could do more things, even though life still wasn't good, but they could move around more freely, and those who don't remember it because they're too young. I'm guessing sort of you fall into the more too young category to remember life before it. But older generations, even those who aren't actually old, but so, for example, I have a friend who's 30, and they can just about remember time before it, and their view on life is different just because they can remember a time just before the siege. And when they talk about the like younger generation, even like their siblings who are slightly younger, they cannot remember a time before the siege very well, and it changes the other mentality.
I was 7 years old. What am I gonna remember? Like, I barely, to be honest, it's not because my childhood wasn't good, but because I was so traumatized in 2008, 2009, like 2008, 2012, and 2014, that literally I had memory loss. Like, I don't remember what life was like before these aggressions, you know? I don't remember many things. And this is just like a side effect of trauma. Did you know that more than 90% of Palestinian children are suffering of PTSD because of what they've gone through? And this is what breaks my heart the most. This is not the first time Palestinians in Gaza have to endure the loud bombs, the use of, you know, they're using chemical weapons. They're using white phosphorus in residential areas. Okay, if you're attacking military targets and Hamas, as they claim to do, why would you use chemical weapons? Literally, the only reason to use chemical weapons is because you want to hurt the civilian population. You want to inflict as much, you know, damage as you could. Because if white phosphorus, it's very toxic, it stays in the air and it deforms people. It burns bodies alive. You know, if you just want to destroy something because for the sake of destruction, why are you using chemical weapons that will literally, you know, just deform humans? And like, it's just, their logic doesn't make sense, you know? It's just a logic of a colonial entity that's trying to justify their tactics, basically. And they keep on lying and they keep on brainwashing the world. And then they have great powers like the US sending troops to Israel. But guess what? The US can send troops and can send tons of aid and can send billions every year, billions of dollars in military aid only. But when Egypt wants to send humanitarian aid, as in food and water, they're not allowed and they're threatened to be bombed. And tell me if this is not an unequal proportion. Tell me if this doesn't show you who's the oppressed and who's the, you know, who's the oppressed and who's the oppressor.
So I wonder, though, if you could talk to, because I mean, you've mentioned that you obviously left Gaza and you've managed to settle obviously in the UK. And I'm just wondering, because obviously you've spoken a lot about the sort of traumas you've experienced, and you've come to the UK, you've come to a new society, and you're trying to sort of deal with all of these issues while being in a new country. I wonder if you can sort of explain, you know, the things that are, you know, you've experienced and things you've noticed here whilst trying to recover from all of these things. if indeed it's possible to recover?
So I honestly don't have an answer for that. I don't know if anyone who's been born in Gaza and raised can recover from what we've seen. You know, I'm in the UK. I'm supposedly in London. I'm supposedly to be in a very safe place, generally. You know, I'm not in a war zone. I'm not in a, yeah. But I feel unsafe every single day. You know, the immediate danger is not just the rockets flying over my head and trying to kill me. If my mom gets killed, I'm not gonna be okay, and I'm gonna have to try to live with that for the rest of my life. You know, I'm still trying to grieve the loss of my father, that I didn't see him for 6 years. And when I went back to Gaza, I saw him for a few months and then he passed away. He got a stroke and suddenly passed away. And Israel took that away from me. They took my most important years to be spending with my family away from me just because I'm a Palestinian. I'm not part of Hamas. I'm not part of any militant group. I'm actually, and what proves that is that I'm in the UK. You know, if I'm a terrorist, why would I be here? Like, because people trust me. People on the internet will still have ways to say that every single Palestinian is terrorist. But come on, I am literally a civilian who grew up in Gaza, had to leave so early, had to like, I can't even begin to explain how difficult my journey has been to be 16 and never have left my refugee camp, and to go to the other end of the world where I don't speak the language, where I have to learn, and I have to, you know, not only prove to other people why I should exist, but also have the pressure of educating everyone about Palestine. When I first arrived here, I would tell people, oh, hi, I'm Yara, I'm from Palestine, and they'd go and be like, Pakistan? And they don't even know what Palestine is. And this is what every Palestinian in the diaspora has to go through. And every Palestinian in the diaspora has someone who lives in Palestine, because if they've been kicked out, their grandparents might have been still in Gaza, or their relatives are still in Gaza, their friends are still in the West Bank. So Palestinians inside or outside Palestine can never really be fully all right or safe. The trauma, we have intergenerational trauma that carries from a generation to another. The violence that Palestinians have been witnessing is not just about the last decade, it's about the last 75 years. So it's, honestly, I always say this, I would have never imagined myself to be a journalist. I used to hate politics. I used to hate talking about it. I used to not want to watch the news. I think it's, as a person, news really stresses me out, and seeing, you know, news of death and killing, and this is what I grew up to, really, really affected my mental health. And I had to suffer from PTSD for years, and I'm still not fully recovered, you know. So why would I choose to be a war journalist? Do you think it's because I'm crazy, or do you think because it's a necessity? It's out of necessity that I have to do this, because I feel like I have a platform, I have the language, I live in the West, I'm safe. It's my responsibility to educate the rest of the people about what's happening. It's my responsibility to show the people why we should exist, why we love life, you know, and I hate it. I hate that I have to report on deaths of my friends. I hate that I have to come on camera and talk about how my friend was an innocent journalist that was killed. I want to talk to the world about the love stories of Gaza. I want to tell them about the hopes and dreams of our children. I want to talk to them about, you know, my favorite memories of me and my dad in our refugee camp. I don't want to report on death and killings. And this is not any journalist in Gaza. We don't want to do that. We're forced to do that.
Yes, yeah. I mean, because obviously, you know, living abroad and having the platform, do you feel though that, I mean, obviously you feel a strong sense of responsibility to share what is happening in Gaza, but do you feel like sometimes too much burden is placed on Palestinians who live outside to explain what's happening in the inside, because the job is not being done sufficiently or even well at all by others who are journalists who could be doing this?
I'm just gonna tell you my experience with this. I've been maybe with more than I don't know, like in the past 4 days, I've probably have done around 10 TV interviews, and every single interview started with asking me if I condemn what's happening because of Hamas, and if I have seen what's happening to Israelis, and it's it's like putting all of this on me as if I am the spokesperson of Hamas, as if I am a part of a militant group. I am literally a Palestinian journalist. Why are you not asking me about my people? Why are you not asking me about my Palestinian friend that was killed? Why are you not asking me about my journalist friend? Why are you not asking me about my mom who's hiding under a dining table? Why are you not asking me about this? Why do I have to come and talk about, like it's just complete dehumanization of my struggle, as if they are coming to tell me, well, yes, people in your home are dying and they're getting killed, but they deserve that. It's okay. But for Israelis, they don't deserve that. It's this double standard that's happening. And many Western media outlets have, even like the BBC has reached out to me, asked me a few questions, and then told me that they can't do the interview anymore. And it's because I'm talking about what's happening. I'm exposing what's happening. I'm saying facts for what they are. I'm saying that Israel is an apartheid state under so many international organizations that named it like that, because I'm talking and exposing the reality. They're so scared of the truth coming out, and they're continuing to perpetuate they're continuing to perpetrate, sorry. Yeah, I'm tired. They're continuing to spread this misinformation, and just they choose what to focus on and what not to. They ignore the last 75 years of my people getting killed, and they only focus about the last 4 days and the attack that Hamas has organized. And they're just expecting every single Palestinian to come and justify or not justify, condemn and not condemn, and talk about the actions of Hamas as if Hamas represents every Palestinian in Gaza. I didn't vote for Hamas. I didn't elect Hamas. I'm not a Hamas spokesperson. Again, I'm a journalist. My job is to tell you what's happening on the ground. I have to tell you what's happening to my people, to my family, and the people I've grew up with.
So as a sort of last two questions that I have, this one I wanted to ask, because we've spoken a lot about the terrible situation that people in Gaza are in, the things that are inflicted upon them, but there's also people trying to live life in Gaza generally. They do have everyday emotions and feelings. They have joyful moments, they fall in love, they do all of these things. So tell us about people in Gaza, beyond the headlines, beyond the suffering. Tell us about them, because I don't feel that's really comes across a lot.
Imagine, Osman, my whole life I've been told that my people are terrorists just because they are rejecting subjugation, just because they're rejecting apartheid, just because they're rejecting to be locked up in an open air prison. I've been told that Palestinians in Gaza don't deserve to live. And these are the people I grew up with. These are the friends I went to school with. This is my mother who gave birth to me. And honestly, I could write books about the people of Gaza, I was really struggling with my mental health before I went back to Gaza. And it's because of how difficult life has been abroad, and being alone and not having my family around me, and just studying in a different country and never being able to go back in breaks, Christmas, whatever, and just being an activist. Because before I was a war journalist, I was actually a human rights advocate, and I was working with different international organizations like Amnesty International and many more. And I realized I'm so done with writing papers that don't reach anyone. I'm so done with condemning what Israel is doing. I want to expose what's happening. I want to be on the ground and share just, the ugly truth of what's actually happening. The people of Gaza, Osman, they're really hard to describe. I've never met a population, even Palestinians in the West Bank, you know, they talk about us as if we're a different breed. I've never met people like that. I think I have one of my favorite and happiest moments in Gaza, you know, when I share a watermelon with my dad on a summer day, when it's really hot and we go to the beach and we just sit down and start talking about life and our dreams and you know, just laughing and playing cards. You know, for me, Gaza is the late nights where my brother takes me to the beach and he plays oud and we listen to music and we start singing together. This is Gaza for me. It's also the patience of the mothers who lost their children, the patience and the strength that is unimaginable, and the determination. There are the most determined people I've ever met. And it's not because I'm from there, you know. I genuinely have never, like, I struggle sometimes to understand them. I struggle to understand how they cope and how, you know, like, it's rare to find someone who hates Gaza, who's living there and hates it. You know, they could hate the situation and what they're going through, but they don't want to leave. They love their home. They love having mint tea in the morning. They love you know, the hospitality of everyone, the niceness and the kindness of our neighbors, you know, like it's how warm people are in the street, you know, like I'd be walking in the street and the guy I get my groceries from would say, "Good morning, Yara," and he knows my name by, like, you know, this is not something we have in the UK, for example. It's very individualistic. There's a sense of community. There's a sense of there's something that unites us, and there's a sense of hope and never giving up, despite how hard it gets. But and their strength is honestly not normal. Like I don't understand. And once you leave, you realize, wow, like I am, it's beyond my control. It's something in my blood that makes me just continue fighting and continue resisting. They're beautiful people. They're very generous people, and we have the best food in the world. You know, we love our spicy food. You know, Gazans are a bit crazy. It's a beautiful culture, full of heritage, full of you know, untold stories, unfortunately. But I just think every time I think about Gaza, I'm just thinking about all these dreams that have been shattered, all these kids that could have been literally the next NASA scientist and the next you know, prime minister of another country, and like they're just so talented, and they're all stripped from their basic rights of just existing. I can't imagine what they would do if they're like living just as normal as other people. I don't know, like, are we just like, you know, yeah.
It's funny you said spicy food, because that's literally the main thing I had in my head, because I've quite a few friends from Gaza, and when I ask her about it, about the food there, she goes, "Oh, you'd like it. There's actually spicy food, unlike in the rest of the region. We actually do put spice into food."
Yeah, we're known for our filfil ahmar, which is basically literally just red chili, like thing that we hand make, and like it's yeah. But yeah, it's all of this culture that's being wiped off. It's all of this culture. Like I don't know how Gazans will be able to live after this aggression. I don't know. This is approaching to be one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. Literally, Israel is committing genocide, you know, and genocide does not only mean tackling a group because of their ethnic you know, background, but it also means that they're like, it's not just about killing them, it's about making everything around them be like hell. It's making Gaza as a, you know, hell on earth. So you know that they've wiped out the whole Rimal neighborhood, which is the only outlet for people to go to and like, you know, shop with each other. And like we have few restaurants, we even have a mall, like a small mall, you know. And recent, like it's literally most of the people travel from different camps and stuff to go to Rimal, like especially when it's Eid, and it was the most like prestigious part of Gaza, and now it's completely gone. Nothing is recognizable anymore.
Yes.
But Osman, I just wanna I have to go because I have other things and I need to check on my family, and this is the longest interview I've done
Oh,
without
sorry.
being on my phone, you know, because I have to keep up with what's happening. But I just want to end on a note that my best friend, Ibrahim Lafi, I want the whole world to know about him. I want the whole world to know how he was a kind man, how he was a supportive friend, how he was a loving brother, how he was a talented photographer and an amazing war journalist. I want the whole world to commemorate his life, to know his name, to not think he's just a number that just got killed, to know that he had dreams, he had so many more years and so much more life to live, and he was just taking away from us. I genuinely don't know one single person who's met Ibrahim and didn't like him. He's the most smiley person I've met. He's the most kind-hearted person I've met, most talented person, had dreams, had, you know, like, you know, when someone just comes into the room and then you feel like, wow, they really lighten the room with their energy and their love, you know. And I could go on for hours to talk about what Ibrahim meant to me, but I think what people need to know that he was a brave soul, and that's why Israel killed him, because they're scared of brave souls and they're scared of Palestinians. Yeah.
Yara, thank you for talking to us at MEMO Conversations. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. Please do tune in next time for more MEMO Conversations.